Hello everyone, welcome to our video. I'm Alfred and
I'm Azan Marwah.
Today we talk about divorce.
My favorite topic.
Mine too. All right. When my friends are asking me whether I should get married, I always ask them, how about divorce? Be careful. Don't get married unless you are very sure about it, because you cannot even get divorced in Hong Kong. Why is that?
Well, the last time you and I spoke, we talked about marriage equality.
Yeah.
And how the laws in Hong Kong have been designed for opposite-sex marriages. So in fact, the divorce law in Hong Kong, it speaks about kinds of marriages which are void. And one kind of marriage which is void is a marriage that's between two people of the same sex.
Oh.
So actually, in Hong Kong, it is a ground for divorce that you are of the same sex, in a sense.
Okay.
Except for various reasons, generally speaking, you can't use that. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's not true that you can get divorced in Hong Kong per se. You can, but it's not called divorce.
That's right. One, it's not called divorce. And two, the system really isn't designed for marriages which all along intended to be same-sex marriages. So it's likely that a court right now would say that that marriage wasn't a marriage at all. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that there is no such thing as same-sex divorce in Hong Kong. I would simply say the question hasn't really been asked of the courts yet.
So nobody has brought it to court yet.
That's right. There is one case where one of the courts talked about whether or not there should be same-sex divorce. And the court said that it couldn't see a reason why there would be. But it wasn't argued in that case. And I would say there are actually lots of good reasons why a person might want to get a divorce and why they might need a divorce.
I think actually asking this question itself is a bit problematic. Think about if you're stuck in a relationship or marriage and you're told that, oh, you can never get divorced. How sad it would be.
Yeah.
You're stuck.
It's the it's the ball and chain for the rest of your life.
Exactly. But actually that's not true, because okay, I always say that divorce is a procedure. I understand that getting through the procedure helps you to get closure. But actually, it is the real reality that makes the difference. Divorce, we were talking about the dissolution of the marriage itself, but a lot of time, actually, this is the part that the two parties have consensus. They agree that the marriage cannot go on forever and go on from now on, and they need to lead separate lives. But then, leading separate life actually comes to a lot of issue as well. The first question that a lot of people ask about is, who moves out?
That's right. And thankfully in divorce, really the court has the power to deal with the three big questions. The first one we just talked about, the need to end the relationship.
Yes.
The second one, the need to deal with the practicalities of the finances.
Yes.
Who gets the dog? Who gets the apartment? Who gets the bank account?
Yes.
And then the third major area that the courts really have to get involved with, which I can say the courts would certainly deal with in Hong Kong. In fact, there's a recent case which I dealt with, where there was a same-sex couple and they were getting broken up.
Yes.
And the question was, who should take care of the children?
Yeah.
Who should have the rights of custody related to the children? And these are the three big areas where the courts need to get involved when there's a breakdown in the relationship. And that's really why, generally speaking, you need some kind of divorce arrangement.
Since you brought up that case, we talk about AA and BB, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Tell us more about that case. Why is it important?
That case is really important for a few reasons. One, it recognizes the rights and interests of children in maintaining their relationships with both parents, even if the legal status of parentage isn't established with one of those parents. Because the reality, you and I know, of same-sex relationships is they have children.
Yeah, they
Those
do
children
have,
exist.
yes.
And they grow up in families where both of those partners are practically, functionally, if not necessarily legally, their parents.
Yes.
And and BB first deals with saying, yeah, the court can and should recognize the children's interests in having their relationship with both parents protected. The second thing that AA and BB recognizes is that when that happens, the person who assumes what we call the guardianship of the child together with the other parent, that person should also have the responsibility to take care of that child, including financially. And in that case, the court was dealing with a relationship that was breaking down and was making orders that would enable both parents to remain in the lives of the children.
So the children actually have, I should say, the parties have joint custody and joint care and control.
That's right.
I think that's brilliant because not a lot of cases, not even in no divorce, that the parties can agree on the joint care and control. Joint custody is normally like a given, but joint care and control is not easy.
Not easy at all. I consider Hong Kong very fortunate that you had a couple like AA and BB come forward, where really both of their common focus was on the children.
Yeah.
And it demonstrated, well, in some ways, that a same-sex couple can behave better than most divorcing or separating couples.
Yeah, but we always say that same-sex couples can have more drama
Yes,
in their
of course.
relationship.
As I said, they could do both, and in this case, I'm very grateful that they were those kind of parents.
But how about if they cannot agree on that and they fight over children, custody, care and control, would it become very complicated?
Well, children's cases, you and I both have that experience.
Yeah.
They can become very complicated. Ideally, they are matters that are dealt with quickly, with reason, based on what's best for the children. After you've investigated, sometimes you might need an expert or not. But the truth is, it can get very complicated, or it can be dealt with simply, depending on the people involved.
Yeah. And would lesbian couples cases be different compared with gay couples? 2 men versus 2 women. Especially when we are talking about birthright, gestation, and who has the guardianship, etc.
Yeah. So in divorce cases, that could be different. But really, the questions, the legal questions, are the same ones.
Yes.
And the core question is, what's in the best interests of the child?
Yeah.
And really, the sexuality or gender of the parents, most of the time, is actually not that important, not that serious. And they're really, this principle became part of Hong Kong law in about 2005. That was the first time the issue of the sexuality or the gender, the sexuality of a parent in a same-sex relationship became important. There was a case called W&W.
Okay.
Nobody needs to know the full history of this case, but in that case, a straight couple divorced because the mother joined a lesbian relationship with her partner, and the father said that her sexuality disqualified her as a parent. And the court, in this occasion, it was the family court. The family court said, no, sexuality is not going to disqualify you as a parent. But there are also many cases after that where the courts have talked about the difference between a male parent and a female parent.
Yes.
And in a very important decision from the Court of Appeal called H&N, the court said, no, there's no presumption in favor of males or females. There's no such presumption.
But then, in reality, when we are talking about children, especially younger children, there seems to be like presumption or preposition that the children will be closer to the mother.
I would say the prejudice exists. Sometimes, well, maybe very often, with the lawyers or with the parents, sometimes with the social workers, and rarely, but still sometimes with the judges. But I would say that those prejudices, they often disappear when there is rigorous analysis. When people are represented by competent professionals, typically those kinds of questions, they can evaporate very quickly.
I think it's most important to actually have a role in the children's upbringing, active role in the children's upbringing, and preserve that role when the parents are going through divorce. Can you imagine like the children becoming like a ball that get thrown from one heart going to another? That is the worst, and that is even worse when the parents are fighting only because they want to fight. Even some people, like, they do a lot of different things as soon as they realize the relationship is going to an end, because they're so afraid of losing.
Well, you highlight a really important issue, which is how to protect children before the breakdown of the relationship.
Yes.
And this is a problem which is very acute for same-sex couples. In that way, it's generally quite different from heterosexual couples.
Yes.
Homosexual couples, they need to take more active steps to protect their children and to protect themselves.
Yes.
And the AA and BB case, it's so funny you keep calling it AA and BB because in my head I think of the names of the parties.
Yeah.
But when I look at that case, I actually think, well, it's incumbent on same-sex parents to go out and get a guardianship order that reflects the reality. Because they cannot assume that the court will take that as the status quo. This is an area, well, until we have true and full marriage equality, family equality, same-sex parents are going to need to go out and positively put in place legal structures that protect the child.
This is actually a very complicated subject, but let's see if we can do it within 5 minutes.
Okay.
The primary position is that the father actually has no guardianship right to to their own children unless and until he married the mother.
That's right.
Can you apply this to the same-sex couples when actually neither of them is the birth mother? Who has the right?
That is a very it's very interesting you raise that example of unmarried couples.
Yes.
In a sense, same-sex couples are like heterosexual unmarried couples.
Yes.
In terms of their status. Now, it can get a little bit complicated, and there are some cases that may come out soon that might clarify things, depending on how the child was conceived, how the child was born. Sometimes people have existing adoption orders or parenting orders from outside of Hong Kong, which can also help the situation. But typical families in Hong Kong, they're like unmarried couples. They have to go to the court and ask for an order in order to create that legal reality.
This is most important because when there are two fathers and only one of them or neither of them has the right to the children, you never know what is going to happen when the children grow up and whether they can make effective decisions on them. That's actually very unsettling.
It is very unsettling, and I would agree with you if what you're saying is that the current law doesn't sufficiently protect children. Because it makes assumptions about families which, if they were ever true, they're certainly not true in modern Hong Kong.
And how about the lesbian couple? If one of them is the birth mother, does the other mother have right to the child, even if they're married?
So the AA and BB case is very interesting because there were two children. The first child was born in Australia. And because of the laws in Australia, even though this couple were unmarried, they had a kind of civil partnership that under Australian law meant they were treated automatically as the joint parents of the child. But because of the specifics of Hong Kong law, that order, let's say it was questionable whether or not it had any effect in Hong Kong. Partly because of when our laws were written, they were written at a different time with a lot of different assumptions. That party, they had a second child that was born in Hong Kong. That child certainly was only the child of one of them. And the other person had no rights, not even arguable rights. And so the order was crucial to regularize it so it was clear both parents had responsibilities of guardianship and both parents had the authority on an equal basis with one another.
Such an order must be very important to the non-biological mother or non-gestation mother.
Well, actually, it goes both ways.
Yes.
Because the biological mother will have two things. On the one hand, she will have all the rights and authorities of a parent. On the other hand, she's also the only person responsible legally to finance, maintain the child.
True.
The other person may be able to just walk away.
Yeah. So AA and BB occurred when the parents are actually in the dissolution of relationship.
That's right.
But the order like this actually applies to those parents who are not talking about divorce. It's actually important to them to have a similar court order so that they can be sure that both parties will have equal right to the children.
That's right. And we've talked about children, but you can say the same issues arise when we talk about finances.
Yes.
There is an obligation, I say obligation, there's an onus on people, the burden on people that they have to positively take steps to ensure that there will be some fairness when the relationship breaks down.
Yeah.
That can be done through deeds of arrangement between people.
Yeah.
And it can be done through other, let's say, clever and sensible arrangements with your estate to ensure that each of you is treated properly, whether someone dies or the relationship breaks down.
I think if we're talking about finances, perhaps in order to complete the whole story, the first thing is, before getting married, what should people think about when they're planning their marriage and finances in case there is such a dissolution in future?
I would say the first thing, it's important to be honest with your partner.
Oh, yes.
This is crucial.
Yeah, communication.
Communication, as a general rule in relationships, both of us know.
It applies to any relationship.
But also in terms of planning what happens when things go bad.
Yes.
You don't want one person to turn around and say, I was deceived.
Yes.
Or I simply didn't know what something meant.
Yeah.
So the first step is always putting your cards on the table.
Absolutely. Putting the cards on the table, laying out the expectations, especially in terms of shouldering financial burden. A lot of time, two people get together, they probably have similar or equal financial footing. But not everything is the case. There are a lot of situations when one party assumed the role of the breadwinner.
That's right.
And the other one assumed the role of caretaker. And that is more common in the traditional marriage, where we are talking about the husband going out and work and the mother minding the children at home. Now, in terms of same-sex relationship, that is actually also the case.
That's right. And Hong Kong, I would say there are lots of different kinds of people.
Yeah.
But there are actually a lot of people who have come to Hong Kong because the other partner is the breadwinner.
Absolutely.
And they arrive here, and it may be that only one of them has work, or only one of them has heavily remunerative work. The other person doesn't have that, and is automatically in a weaker position.
And that person probably sacrificed their own career path in order to form a family with the partner in another country.
Yeah, in heterosexual divorce, we talk about this concept of compensation as an aspect of fairness.
Yes.
And this is something which happens the same in homosexual relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially when we are talking about accumulation of wealth together, it is only fair to start share it fairly upon the demise of the marriage. Perhaps not everyone knows what it means by equal sharing. Can we start with the DD and LKW?
I think that's a great place to start. I think the first thing to say is that not all marriages are the same.
Yeah.
Straight or gay or
Agreed.
lesbian. Then not
Yes.
all relationships are the same.
Yes.
And what's fair will depend on the circumstances.
Yeah.
So in this case called DD and LKW or LKW and DD,
Following white and white.
yeah, there's a decision from the Court of Final Appeal. It was a straight divorce.
Yeah.
And the court was concerned with what happens when the family has more money than either of the parties need for their maintenance.
Yeah.
What do you do with the surplus? And the Court of Final, it used to be, the Court of Final Appeal was upturning the previous law, but the previous law was, well, you would only look at one person's needs generously assessed, and you would just provide them with like a meal ticket for life, really. But the Court of Final Appeal says, no, that's not quite fair. Instead, what the court should do is the court should consider, one, we reject discrimination.
Okay.
Discrimination between males and females, breadwinner, homemaker, we're going to reject that.
Yeah.
We're going to say instead there are different kinds of contribution to a family.
Yeah.
That can be by making the home, or it can be by making the bread. Both of those are equal.
Yeah.
Neither will there be discrimination based on gender. Now, that same principle, I would say, in principle, applies to heterosexual and homosexual couples.
And it should be.
The same. The next thing the court said is that we're going to say that generally the factors like the length of the marriage,
Yeah.
those things are also relevant, and how the parties have conducted themselves.
Yeah.
So if the parties have said, you know what, you keep your finances, I'll keep my finances, we're going to limit our relationship to this part, well, the court says, well, we're going to respect that. But subject to that caveat, the court also says generally fairness means equality.
Yeah.
This is where people get that idea in their head of 50-50.
Okay.
But the Court of Final Appeal isn't quite saying 50-50. It's saying after you've taken care of needs, after you've adjusted for things like how long the marriage was, how the parties have conducted themselves, perhaps if they've signed what's called a prenuptial agreement, after you consider those things, generally speaking, the approach should be equality. And we should be closer to equality, or 50-50 sharing. The longer the marriage is, the more both parties have contributed to the relationship.
Okay. I always use the example for, like, you have $100, I have $1. If we are getting divorced, your $100 we put together with my $1 and put it together is $101. So each of us will get $50.50.
Yeah.
And then because I only have $1, you have to give me $49.50.
That's right.
Yeah. So it is as simple as that. It sounds like as simple as that. But in terms of calculating whether you have $100 or I have $1, it's an entirely different story.
That's right.
And then we haven't even talked about needs. I may have only $1, but if my needs is going to be $10 per year, and I have another 20 years to live or 30 years to live, I definitely would need more than $30 or even $300. So in that case, I can get more than half from you.
That's right. In surplus cases.
In surplus cases, when there are surplus, then we're talking about
right.
equal footing, 50-50.
That's right.
But then when we're talking about need case,
In needs cases, it will really depend.
Yeah.
What are my capacities? What's my need? So if you need $10 and I only need $1, or if you need $10 but I need $10 too, but let's say you're quadriplegic, and you find it very difficult to earn money, but I'm earning $200.
Yeah.
All of that goes into the mix.
Yes.
But the general approach of the court is we want to make sure that each person's needs are covered.
Yeah.
But we're still looking to ultimately the parties going their own way.
Yes.
Even though the court does have the power to do this thing called
Yes.
periodical maintenance.
Yeah. But which is the reason why divorce can become very complicated, because there are quite a lot that can be argued at, like whether you have $100 or not, or you have another person who is now holding another $100 for you.
Exactly.
And or whether you are holding $50 on behalf of another person, like your mother. Yeah. So it shouldn't be $100 that can be divided, or whether my need is $10 or even only $5, I'm just inflating my need for the purpose of the divorce.
I totally agree with you. And the reality is there are different ways of slicing a cake.
Yeah.
And you can and the court really has a broad discretion. But I would say this, that process, which can be very difficult in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
can be very expensive, that's true.
Absolutely.
But the focus is really on what is fair.
Yeah.
Now, you can make that process more expensive, more difficult by not planning for it, coming back to the question you asked before.
Exactly.
And you can make it even more difficult if you are not forthright with the other person.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, people do agree things. And the courts have increasingly said they're going to recognize that
Yeah.
by saying, okay, we've agreed ahead of time.
Yeah.
This is what I owe you.
Yeah.
This is what you owe me.
Yeah.
This is what I can keep to myself.
Yeah.
That's what you keep to yourself.
Yeah, which is exactly where the prenup comes into play. But I always say that prenup actually is not a very effective way to protect the family wealth. My take is that, first of all, prenup, you have to have separate legal representation so that when it is enforced, the court is satisfied that both parties actually understand what they are signing and with legal effect to it. Mm-hmm. And the legal effect to it is not just like, oh, this is the terms and you have to agree to it. How one party is better off or worse off in case of a divorce with the terms in place. Mm-hmm. And separate legal representation is one thing. Asset disclosure is another, which actually a lot of people do find it very unromantic. Think about it. The purpose of the prenup is to what we call ring fence premarital assets, assets that you bring into the marriage. But the terms of the contract is that in case of a divorce, you're not going to claim against me for the assets that I bring into the marriage. And a lot of people do find, actually, my spouse doesn't really know how much I have.
Some people don't know how much they have.
Exactly.
But as unromantic as it is,
Yeah.
and that is certainly the thing that's been told to me every time I've suggested a prenup,
Yeah.
I will tell people what you're signing up for is
Yeah.
not a date.
Yeah.
You're not signing up for a holiday.
Yeah.
You are signing up for a partnership.
Yes.
And it's a partnership that's going to cover every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
If you, at the beginning of that relationship, don't show the other person that part of your life, it can cause a problem.
But then at the same time, they can always also say that by showing them that side of my life changes the dynamics of relationship.
That's right.
I can no longer be sure that he loves me for who I am.
The other thing I would say, beyond this very difficult aspect of the conversation,
Yeah.
is that really a prenup is not, is like you said, is not a panacea.
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to end the conversation.
Yeah.
I would say that a sensible person, particularly those people with more complicated financial lives,
Yeah.
should actually be reviewing
Yeah.
their planning from year to year.
Yeah.
Where there is a concern about relationships ending,
Yeah.
it's something that ought to be done with a little bit more thought on a regular basis. Because it
Absolutely.
may be, when you make something that people often discover late into the relationship, is that the courts can actually undo certain kinds of
Yes.
of transactions.
Yeah.
And it does make more sense when you're making major changes to your financial life to involve your spouse, at least in making sure that they are advised and informed, so that it doesn't come back to bite you later on.
Actually, a lot of people ask me this question. Can I simply set up a family trust and then to avoid the separation of marital assets? So the answer is no. This is too late.
Yeah.
If you want to set up a trust, set it up before you get married.
There's a recent case in the High Court
Yeah.
where that's exactly what one of the parties did.
Okay.
They set up a family trust. They invited their spouse, but they didn't really give their spouse any opportunity to object to it.
Okay.
And the court did exactly that.
Yeah.
Completely unwound
Yeah.
this trust that had been set up.
Yeah.
And in a very expensive way. And I would say that that person was poorly advised in how they went about that trust.
Yeah.
There were good reasons for that trust, but they
Yeah.
went about it in a way which wasn't really designed to
Yeah.
ensure the court would enforce it.
Yeah. that requires a lot of planning and good advice from people who also have the experience in the divorce court. How the trust is going to be treated if things go down and the parties are going for divorce? Is it an effective tool to protect family assets? This is particularly the case when we're talking about another aspect of the prenuptial agreement that is of persuasive value. The court has discretionary jurisdiction that it can always depart from the terms of the agreement and make a decision that is considered fair to the parties. So ultimately, I do agree that the prenup is not a particularly effective tool to protect family wealth. And I think I would agree with you more on the understanding, communication, disclosure, and be honest with each other as the way to protect the family wealth.
It's like drafting a contract. You want to have a full discussion when people are on good terms. You don't want to wait until the bad stuff has hit the fan.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when family members, a lot of time, if everything are laid out on the table, it sounds so unromantic. And this is a conversation that a lot of time may not be that easy. Why are we talking about this? Well, are you thinking that I'm after your money? Or, a lot of misunderstanding can arise.
Yeah.
I think we can carry on this conversation for another hour or two, but let's wrap it up and we talk about another things another time.